this lecture, I want to introduce a few more things in Visual Studio. We have the navigation bar at the top here, and we can turn that on and off in the Tools section under Options. If we go down to the text editor and C++, for example, we can enable the navigation bar or disable it right here. You'll see that goes away. Back to Options, and it will enable that again. We can also disable the line numbers if we want to do that. In this section, we can also select if we want to auto list members, display parameter information, and so on, as well as automatic page completion. But for now, I'll just click OK, bring that back. With this, we have a couple of drop downs. In this first one, if I hover over this, we can see that we can view and switch to other projects this file may belong to. That is the current file main.cpp. So currently it only belongs to this particular project, this CPP demos project. Next, you will see we have this scope show up. Now, by the way, I just have a simple demo here. We've seen this example before. I have some square function and I have the main function with some code in there. It doesn't really matter what that does for this demonstration, but we can see that we are currently in the global scope. Now, if I go and create some struct, let's say my struct, you can see the scope changes to my struct, and I can click outside of that, and then we are in the global scope. Note that the square function and the main function, of course, are in the global scope. If I click in here, we are in the my struct scope. We can switch that scope right here as well. And then let's say we go and switch to the global scope. We can now choose where we want to navigate to. So we can click on this drop down, and now we can navigate to some function, for example, such as main or square. And as you can see, we are now navigating to that particular function. Same thing with the class. I'll go and create a class. And if I press tab, that'll create the constructor and destructor for us. Okay, so that can save you some time. That is another hint for you. And so here I can go and navigate to the global scope, or I can navigate to that particular class. And then I can go and select that particular thing within that scope. Now see, we select the declarations. Now what I can do is I can select this one. We have two here, one with the down arrow basically. And if I select that one and I select the particular thing, so the destructor, for example, then it will navigate to the destructor. That is handy if you have a huge file where you have thousands of lines of code. And then of course I can always switch back to the global scope, always keeping the particular scope in mind. Again, this first one is just for the particular project, and then the second one is the particular scope. So I have to keep the scope in mind. In the global scope, I want to navigate to the main function, so I'll click on that. Right. Okay, so that is a quick introduction to the navigation bar in Visual Studio. We can customize the scroll bar to the right here. You can see that where I click, a blue horizontal line shows up, which is going to indicate to me more or less where my caret is, my typing caret is within that particular file. But also if I search, so if I do Control F and I type something like E, the selected instances show up in that scroll bar now. Close that off. So we can customize that by going to the tools again, tools, options, and within the text editor, I will select all languages and then drop that down and go to scroll bars here. So within the scroll bar section, let's say we want to turn off the vertical scroll bar. Click OK, that'll turn that off. Tools, options again, turn that back on. And you can decide to turn on and off the marks, the errors. So for example, if you have an error, IntelliSense will now pick that up and show you, okay, at that particular point in the file you will have an error, so you can navigate to that quickly. Okay, so just remember that when you are doing debugging. Tools, options, and if that does not show up, again go here to options, text editor, scroll bars, and check to see if those are enabled. Now you can select the map mode, which is what I want to talk about here. Map mode is basically going to display a miniature version of your file. You can select how wide that is in this drop down. Let's just choose medium here. And I'll click OK, and you can see that to the right, the vertical bar is now changed to this sort of miniature version of what we see in our code file. If I hover over this, that will show me this preview window, so I can quickly navigate to that particular place by left-clicking. You might be thinking this takes up a lot of space, but remember you can always go and unpin some of your windows, such as the one to the left here. You can unpin that, for example, to make more space if you want. I'll go back to Tools and Options, and remember this tooltip. If I have this turned off, click OK. Then if I hover over that tooltip does not show up. Go back and make sure to have that enabled. And then you can have this set to something like wide, click OK, and you can see this is a bit wider now. One more option, if I go to Tools, Options, I can go down and I can turn this off. Instead of having set to wide or something, I can turn that off and make sure to enable Show Preview Tooltip. And if I click OK, you can see we now basically have our regular vertical bar, the vertical scroll bar. But if I go and hover in here, notice that we get this preview tooltip, so I can go and scroll to more or less where I want to navigate. And I can see, okay, I want to navigate to the main function. Left click on here, and that will now navigate to where I want to go. I want to navigate to my class, left click on here, and that navigates over here. So that is one benefit. If you don't want that miniature version of your file showing up, you can turn that off but enable Show Preview Tooltip and still get that preview. You can also select Use Bar Mode for vertical scroll bar, and that is basically our regular vertical scroll bar that we get. Okay, so that was basically all I wanted to demonstrate with how we can customize the vertical scroll bar. Again, so far our examples are really simple, but once you start working in production code, where you can have files with thousands of lines of code, then these sorts of tips will come in handy.